I will be brief. I was listening to the debate today. I wasn't on the floor all of the day. I had a little minor surgery this morning, so you'll be glad to know it's going to be a brief speech before the painkillers kick in again. I think, members, we have learned a lot during the regular session and this special session on this subject. I think we've learned to change our language a bit. I haven't heard people refer to people who are in this country illegally as aliens as much as I used to hear it. Sometimes all of us may slip and do that, but that's not happening nearly as much. I think all of us have tried to ratchet up the level of this discussion, but we still got a long ways to go. I think there are always unintended consequences of any legislation that passes out of anybody that passes laws. A major unintended consequence out of this legislation, I think, is going to be, Senator Patrick, is not going to keep more people from coming into this country. And I don't think this bill, as it is written and is going to pass, is going to keep more people from being in the shadows. I think it'll be the reverse of that. I think it's going to be more people are going to go into the shadows. And we're going to have more instances where people are having to live on the margins because they will be so afraid of being detected. They're going to even work cheaper. They're going to take more abuses. I suspect the legislation will be challenged in court, and we'll see what happens with that. But the biggest consequence of this law, I think, is that instead of prodding the federal government to give us comprehensive immigration reform, this patchwork in the various states and jurisdictions really makes it more difficult to get there. Because a lot of the energy that is being used on both sides of the political equation for these efforts in various states really detracts from finding a consensus on the federal level. You take a decent human being on this issue, Senator John McCain. He was for a reason to compromise before he ran for president, and then decided he had to be against it because he had to work his base. I don't think bills like this move us towards that consensus. Hey, this is a big state and it's a trendsetter. State with another governor who may end up running for president. State with a presiding officer who may well be one of those people making the decision on what happens on this issue and on the federal level when it gets on the plate. I don't think this makes it easier. I think it makes it harder. Other point that I want to make to you, I heard a lot of references about Ellis Island tonight. And I think it's interesting for all of us to go back and get a little quick history lesson. The ancestors of everybody in this chamber, not just the 32 of us who were elected to be here, the ancestors of everybody in this chamber probably came here as an illegal immigrant, unless they've been masquerading as something other than a Native American. You know, history is written by she or he who writes it. And it's interesting, each year when we discuss and celebrate the independence of Texas as an example, very rarely do we go back and look at just what the commitments Moses Austin had to make to the Spanish government to get that decree for the impresarios to settle here in this land. And then, Letitia, what it took for Stephen F. Austin to move to Mexico, become very much accepted, very much a part of the society in Mexico, to get the land grant again that had expired because his father didn't use it. Now, one read of history, not necessarily my read, but one read of history was that the Mexican government, when they got the independence from Spain, among other things, declared slavery to be illegal, put it in the Constitution. And they said to the impresarios, you got to make a number of commitments, a lot of commitments. 3 big commitments were, for people who advocate English only, might I add, they said you got to learn Spanish. You got to speak Spanish, or you got to fake it. At least when we show up, you got to at least decide, if you can't say hello, know how to say adios when we leave. They said for people who are very much part of the religious right, you got to adopt our religion, their religion, being Catholicism. And the third one, a major one, was they said you couldn't have slaves. Now, most reasonable folks could take a little Spanish. You could say, as difficult as this land is, I don't think we're going to be going to church every Sunday. But that issue of the slave trade was a major source of frustration. All of our ancestors came here as immigrants. Some, over 12 million, crossed Ellis Island. The only reason that name stands is probably because Ellis's ancestors, probably not mine, I'm not part of that family, probably came here as immigrants as well. I guess that's a good Scottish or a good Irish name. But initially, the Native Americans called that land, they called it, I think, Gull Island, because of the seagulls who were settling there. And then at some point, they named it after whatever the tree was that they hung people from. And then when Sam Ellis got the land from the colonial powers, he was so slick, he tried to sell it. He was a real estate speculator, among other things. And that name, Ellis Island, stuck. Florence, over 12 million people crossed that little 3.5 acres of land, which now may be somewhere in the neighborhood of 20-something. Some of that landfill from establishing the Port Authority of New York went over there to expand that island till the tourist trap would go on today. Now, I wanted to give you this little history lesson to just make a basic point. Immigrants have been the lifeblood of this land. Whether they were white, whether they were Hispanic, whether they were Royce, African slaves who came here and pretty much built the great Western empires that have existed all this time. It's amazing what you can do with free labor. A lot of people, I think, don't really want comprehensive immigration reform because they want people living in the shadows. In a lot of ways, it's a new form of slavery. They want people who work cheap. They want people that they can push around and they can't do anything about it. And they are not willing to draw the line between what is politically right but morally wrong. I don't question anybody's personal beliefs or desires, regardless of how you vote for this bill tonight. But all of us who've gotten to this level in government, you know, is not just what's written on paper, it's how it is enforced. And our state has historically had an ignoble history when it comes to dealing with issues of race and ethnicity. Only 4 minority states in the country. First one was Hawaii. Second was New Mexico. Third's California. And the fourth one is Texas. And that, to me, is why passing this legislation in Texas is so bad. Our population is a reflection of what this great nation's population will be in the not-too-distant future. And that, my friends, is why, with all of the great things that were said tonight by previous speakers, start with you, Dean, far better than I could say it. The emotion that I felt in Zafaridi's voice and Ureste's voice, I saw him on the news early tonight talking about his personal story of being deported, although he was in this country illegally. It says to me that there only have to be 16 votes to pass this bill. And I hope some of you will rethink your position and decide when the roll is called, do you want to be on the wrong side of history? Thank you.